And review embargo over, let's talk about Michael. Full transparency, before we dive into the review, I was able to see this film on the 16th of April, more than a week early, thanks to our friends over at Universal Pictures South Africa. So massive shout out and thank you to them for inviting me to the South African premiere. It was a ton of fun. There were loads of Michael cosplayers. The vibe was incredible. Check out the reel on my Instagram. We had a ton of fun on the red carpet and checking out the film early. But now we can finally chat about it. Let's talk about Michael. Going into the screening, I was honestly quite skeptical. Since Bohemian Rhapsody, we have seen a slew of music biopic after music biopic after music biopic. Unfortunately, this is one of those movies where you go into it thinking, is this film going to justify its own existence? We are talking about one of the greatest entertainers the world has ever seen, the undisputed king of pop, a massive back catalogue of hits, not just music, of hits. To answer the initial question was, does it justify its own existence? Does it stick the landing? For the most part, yeah, this is a really, really good time. I found myself sitting in that cinema, my feet were bopping up and down, I was humming along to the lyrics, but at the same time, I was involved in an incredibly intense human story, and that to me is where the film shone. One of my biggest gripes with Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's a film that, don't get me wrong, Rami Malek is great in it, but my biggest issue with that film was the amount of manufactured drama that they felt they had to shoehorn into the film, whereas this feels like an intensely personal character study of Michael Jackson as a human being and as a person. Also, wasn't necessarily building up to one of these big key moments that you felt you were waiting for it to get there the whole time. I felt like Bohemian Rhapsody was completely reliant on that Live Aid performance at the end. And with it being an intensely character-driven story, an intensely personal story that we're following the development of Michael throughout the film, it doesn't fall into those pitfalls and traps of being like, okay, when is the next hit? When is the next song coming? There were moments in this film where I honestly felt like I'd forgotten I was watching a Michael Jackson movie, and I was just fully immersed in the drama and what was really unfolding on screen, which for me is incredibly rare in a biopic with such a well-known figure, where you could easily be waiting for the next big hit to come across the screen, for the next iconic performance to be encapsulated, for the next, wow, how did they capture that moment in the Thriller music video, or how does he nail the moonwalk moment? That wasn't really the point of this film. I felt that intensely character-driven narrative. It feels like we're a behind-the-scenes actor in that process, where we're actually alongside Michael, along for the ride, instead of just an audience member. And there isn't that boundary between the audience and Michael. I feel like they did a very good job of making you feel like you were along for Michael's ride. Putting aside Michael Jackson, the fact that you are dealing with themes of fame, depression, loneliness, a childhood lost, trauma. Ultimately, the film was always going to live or die on 2 or 3 key performances. And for me, those 3 performances are undoubtedly Jafar Jackson. Obviously, everybody's going to be talking about it. He embodies Michael. We'll get to him in a moment. Our young Michael Jackson, absolutely loved him on screen. He was that perfect mix between adorable and charismatic that young Michael was in those formative years as part of the Jackson 5. But for me, who really stole particularly the first act of the film was Colman Domingo, who brings a phenomenal portrayal of Joseph Jackson to the movie. In this film, he is really a central plot point that drives the entire film forward. He casts a massive shadow over Michael Jackson's life and over a substantial portion of the plot of this movie. He really is the driving force in helping us to understand why Michael Jackson turned out the way he did. Joseph Jackson seems to have been somebody who shaped Michael's worldview very heavily, and all that deep-seated trauma in his childhood, where we see these really, really difficult scenes between a stern, strict, and really at times terrifying Colman Domingo and our young Michael Jackson, show us that abuse, which is really difficult to watch at certain points, is really something that shaped Michael Jackson as a figure, as a human being. And it would be very easy for Domingo to just lean into this villain arc that he could do with Joseph Jackson, but he does bring across a character who's certainly cold, demeaning, controlling, manipulative, but at the same time there is a humanity to him, and I think that is where Colman Domingo has struck the balance absolutely perfectly. Honestly, if award season knows what's good for it, Colman Domingo is in the conversation for every single supporting actor nomination. But ultimately, we've got to talk about Jafar Jackson and how he portrayed Michael. Man, the way Jafar Jackson was able to move like Michael Jackson, and I'm not just talking about his dance moves, I'm talking about the way he held himself, the way he walked, the way he got up from a sofa. Everything about Jafar Jackson was Michael. The first time Jafar Jackson spoke, there was a hush that descended upon the audience because he was able to embody Michael in terms of the cadence of the way he spoke, the playful charm that he had, the awkwardness, the shyness, and then once he got on stage, throwing all of that aside and becoming the king of pop and this incredible larger-than-life figure. That juxtaposition between the shy, awkward Michael that we see in so many intimate scenes in this film and the megastar that we see on stage, it's electric to see it in a cinema. It is absolutely incredible and something you need to experience with other people around you. Yeah, when Thriller is on, when Beat It is on, he nails it. And like I said earlier, it feels like we're along for the ride with him. We're not just a member of the audience. It feels like we're a part of his crew almost, going through this journey with Michael as he goes through young life all the way through to pretty much the height of his powers. What makes this film work is the fact that it's not building towards a big crescendo at the end. We're not waiting for that Live Aid performance. We actually, throughout the film, there's a lot of moments where I was thinking, where is this film going to leave Michael? Because you feel time passing, you feel this film washing over you, and you think, well, a lot has happened, they're setting up a lot. Where is this going to end? This is a character study. This is about understanding the person, Michael Jackson, as much as it is about understanding the performer and what went into those choreographies, what went into those musical sets. And while that approach makes the film feel incredibly honest and at times actually quietly devastating, there are some things that bugged me in this film. And I'll get onto those now before we get into spoiler territory. I think first and foremost, the fact that Janet Jackson is just omitted from the film entirely. That might be a minor spoiler for some people. What really draws attention to the fact that Janet Jackson isn't there is that LaToya is repeatedly mentioned throughout the film, and that kind of reminds you, like, hey, wait a second, where's Janet? I think the next biggest bummer for me, aside from the whole Janet Jackson debacle, is the fact that there are some absolute bangers missing from this film. No Smooth Criminal, no Dirty Diana were huge omissions for me. If you're expecting his entire catalogue to be covered in the film, definitely not going to be the case. But for me, ultimately, the biggest disappointment, and now we're in full-on spoiler territory mode, you have been warned if you haven't seen the film, but if you do know Michael's life, it's not going to be the biggest spoiler in the world, is the fact that the Pepsi accident happened. If you're unfamiliar with the story, what happened was, during the filming of a Pepsi commercial, Michael's hair caught on fire, and he was severely burnt on his scalp. Sustaining those serious injuries were a real turning point in his life, because it was ultimately the point at which he started to develop a dependency on a lot of controlled substances, things for pain management and for sleeping, and that is set up in the film. It's obviously a huge part about ultimately how Michael passed away in the end. They do lean into it. They do mention and lay the foundation for this being a plot point for his later life. There's a line where he flat out says in the hospital, I don't want to take these. I don't like what they're doing to me. And there's no follow through on it. And the reason for that is that the film actually ends in 1988, with Michael really at the peak of his live performing powers. He is embarking on the Bad tour. He's doing a long run at Wembley. He's shed the weight of Joseph's influence over him out of the Victory tour and finishing up with his brothers, and now really going out on his own. So it's a really cathartic moment in terms of what we've been building towards in the film. But there are plot points that feel unaddressed, and a large portion of his catalogue that feels unaddressed. But this is where I think everyone in the cinema was fairly ecstatic, I think would be a good way of putting it. The film ends with him performing on stage at Wembley, and the text comes across the screen, Michael's journey continues. Now that to me immediately tells me that there is going to be a sequel to Michael. I expect within the next year or so to see possibly just a film called Jackson, and we have the Michael Jackson duology. Would be absolutely incredible if that's the case. I would love to see that come to fruition. Ultimately, Michael is a strong, often emotional, character-driven piece, lifted by a transformative central performance from Jafar Jackson. Those exclusions and loose threads definitely sting, but the film left me wanting more, and if there's a sequel in the works, that is what I can't wait to see. If not, and that's the final curtain call, I still thoroughly enjoyed my time in the cinema. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Michael. Let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. Have you seen the film? Were there some omissions that got you? What were those goosebump defining moments for you? If you want to, just go ahead and rank your favorite Michael Jackson songs in the comment section down below. I always love to hear from you. If you did enjoy the review, go ahead, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.